For more, I'll speak to Guiborg Delamotte, a political science professor and the head of the Japanese Studies Department at the French Research University Inalco here in Paris. Hello to you. We're just getting the very first exit polls coming through. NHK saying that the ruling coalition projected to fall short of a majority in the upper house. How significant are these results?
Well, it means the LDP will be in yet more difficult a position to pass its bills. So that's never good news, of course. It means it is going to have to reconsider the coalition in which it is now with Komeito, and that's likely to remain. But it might need to add another partner to that coalition, which means a more fragile government as well. And it means Ishiba may have to lose power, which we sort of expected, because in any case, about a year ago, when Prime Minister when Ishibashi Shigeru became Prime Minister, it seemed fairly likely that he wouldn't be in power for more than a year. And in fact, he did rather well. I mean, remaining that long in power, really. His position within the party was rather wobbly, not very stable. So lots of implications with those upper house elections.
Yeah, and these are, again, very early results. We have to wait to see what will bear out. Going back to that point about possibly bringing in another coalition partner, who do you think that could be, and how would that change the agenda?
Yes, two possibilities in my view. The biggest opposition party, which is the Constitutional Democratic Party, might decide or might be offered to join the coalition. So that would be akin to really joining a government that it's been fighting, of course. But from the government's point of view, by comparison with the far left or far right parties, forgive me, the government is rather closer in terms of policies, or is more likely to find common ground with the opposition party than the extremes in any case. Now then, so that's one possibility. And given that there are no elections for the coming 3 years, it is possible that the Constitutional Democratic Party, so again, the first opposition party, might think that it can, by joining the coalition, ensure that its ideas are more visible, gain ground, and therefore that it puts itself in a better position to gain power next time. So that's one possibility. Another option would be for a party that'd be right-wing to join, but not far-right. So that would be another opposition party which stemmed from the same party once upon a time at the Constitutional Democratic Party, so-called Kokumin Minchito, so the People Party. Possibly, even if that was still not sufficient, another small party called the Restoration Party. And so these are two right-wing parties, but moderate right, with which the LDP has quite a bit in common, particularly the less liberal wing of the party, so the more conservative wing, and so that would be a possible coalition as well. So depending on the results, either really the LDP's goes to the opposition, or it reaches out to those two opposition parties to which it is relatively close. So these are the options I see at this stage. I really don't see the LDP teaming up with the extreme parties, which are, however, rising in the polls and are likely to have a fairly good result.
And on that note, I mean, the LDP having the sustained leadership in Japan in the post-war period. Japan, in some ways, spared of the social division that we've seen in many other parts of the world, notably in the West more recently. Do you think Japanese society might change as we see some of these populist or far-right groups gain ground in Japan, even if it is still relatively small?
Well, it is possible a little bit. I mean, I'm sorry, I should mention a third option, which would be that the Constitutional Democratic Party does so well that indeed it arrives first in the polls and therefore is able to form a coalition itself and be in power. So that, are three options really that I see. Japanese society is indeed changing. I mean, they've had to suffer economic hardships recently. I mean, the inflation rate is really quite high, 4%, but it's not due to a dynamic economy at all. So there's very little wage increases. So people feel poorer as time goes. And they see more and more foreigners arrive, and really 3%, whilst 3% is very, very is minute by comparison with our societies. It's a change that has been installed in Japan, and has meant that foreigners, the share of foreigners in society has gone from 1%, where it was for many years, to 3%. So that's a big change for people. It's a very visible change. On the other hand, a lot of people acknowledge that they do need foreigners, but Japan now seems to be more prone more to that populist tendency, which it had indeed escaped entirely. So you do see this kind of anti-foreigner discourse. And then, of course, the other populist kind of ingredients, which you find in Japan in those extreme parties, is lowering taxes, and in particular the consumption tax. The consumption tax is important for the health of public finances, which are indeed in poor condition, with a very big deficit, public deficit.
Yeah,
and public debt.
Yeah, the latest media projections out of Japan now indeed confirming that the government has lost the upper house majority, as we've been discussing. Regardless of who is leading Japan, I think the next big date on the calendar is August 1st. That's when those new U.S. trade tariffs go into effect, at 25% on Japanese goods. I think rising prices were one of the main issues in this election. Now, whoever's leading Japan is going to want to find a way to bring those prices down. But in the short term, do you think they're going to continue to increase before they decrease?
Well, it's very hard to act upon them. I mean, one thing the government can do is try and ensure that the price of rice, which is a very important commodity, of course, are kept low, which it hasn't done until now. So this has to do with the fact that, and it has indeed ensured that it released some of the reserve it was keeping. So whilst it might have been a good idea to have rice set aside, I mean, it did put prices up in circumstances where the harvest had not been good. So that's something the government wants to think about. But then if we're going to think about talk about increasing rice production, for instance, that does mean introducing more foreigners, because there aren't enough farmers now. It's a declining population of elderly. So that's, issues like that are not easy to tackle, of course. And then if you look at the rest of inflation, is a lot to do with imported inflation. So that can be, to do with energy prices, the wars in the world that have indeed pushed them up. So this is hard to act upon.
Yep, and we're still waiting for these results. Again, I just want to underline these are exit polls coming out of Japanese media. But if we're talking about Shigeru Ishiba likely to step down here, how soon would that be? Who do you think his possible replacement would be, presuming the LDP retains power?
Yes. So if indeed the LDP retains a relative majority, then it will remain in power in the conditions, the circumstances we described. So as it was a couple of, not just one, but a couple probably of coalition partners. So the people who are likely to replace Ishibashi are people who probably competed against him in the previous elections a year ago. So Koizumi is one possible candidate, but he's 43 in his 40s. That could be a bit young still. Former ministers would include Kono Taro and Motegi, former ministers who've been in very senior positions, and yet have not been associated with the government, at least for Kono. He's not been associated with the government this time, and he's been fairly marginal. So he might be a good candidate actually, because the LDP has been criticized for scandals, and he's not been harmed by those. And then there might be Hayashi, who's presently the cabinet secretary general. So he could be chief cabinet secretary. He could be a good candidate as well. He's the former Minister of Defense. So that's another possibility. So there are a number of people who could be candidates. I don't really see the lady called Takaichi Sanae, who's really quite far to the right, making a comeback as a possible successor to Ishibashi Shigeru.
All right, Guiborg, thank you so much. Guiborg Delamotte, professor at Inalco. Thank you.